Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Jen, I think you're on a black screen. Not quite sure why Jen's screen is black. Never mind. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to a Hire webinar on how to pivot your TA team from high growth hiring and build adaptivity in the team. So Hire is the world's largest community of TA professionals in technology. It's free to join. So if you're not a member, please head on over to hirehq.com and sign up to the Slack community of over 11,000 members. Today's webinar is sponsored by Talentful, a leading project RPO for the tech industry, working across the US and Europe for companies like Alphabet, Microsoft, and Atlassian, as well as startups from seed to IPO. So head over to talentful.com to find out more. Today, I'm joined by a panel of fantastic guests who are all leading huge TA orgs in tech companies. Like almost everyone in tech, they're leading through an incredible period of change, and we're here to pick their brains on how they've repurposed their teams and endeavored to keep their organizations together. Please ask questions as we go through the discussion using LinkedIn comments, and we'll try and weave them into the conversation. There's no doubt that TA, particularly in tech, has gone through a period of incredible change. We went from the most in-demand skill set in 2021 to the vast layoffs across 2022 and 23. And we're setting out today to find out how we as leaders and what we should be doing right now and what we're likely to need to do in the future. And I couldn't think of a better panel to talk about this with. So without further ado, could I ask my guests to introduce themselves? Jen? Oh dear. Why is Jen on a black screen? Technical issues. What's going on there? No. Oh. Sorry, what's going on? She's gone completely. Andrea, maybe if you could introduce yourself, and we'll get Jen back at some point.
Start.
She was working fine earlier, wasn't it? It was actually working fine. I don't know what's going on.
It was working 5 minutes ago.
We've definitely seen her. We can confirm. We've cited her today. So.
But we can kick off. I'm sure she's. Oh, look, there she is.
Can you hear me?
Hey.
Yeah. That's one way of making an entrance there, Jen.
Classic Jen. Sorry about that.
So maybe Jen, you can start with an introduction.
Okay, sorry for getting in the middle of you there, Andrea. So yeah, Jen Mullen. I work at Intuit, and we make products like QuickBooks and Mailchimp, and Credit Karma. And my role is leading our global hiring and our US sales and US customer success hiring. So a bit of an interesting one. But yeah, that's me.
Andrea?
Hi, Andrea Tamaris, also been known as Andrea Marston, for those of you I've met before. And I lead our global talent acquisition for customer and business at VMware. VMware is a software company, about 35,000 people globally.
Great. And David?
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm David Moore. I lead the talent acquisition team at an enterprise software company called Box. We're about 2,500 people, so a bit smaller than VMware and Intuit. But I've been in TA my entire career, originally from the UK, but left in 2001 and have been all over the world and now live in California. So yeah, very happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Great. Cool, well, without further ado, let's get going. So the first question I wanted to ask was, how can TA leaders showcase a TA function's value when hiring numbers are smaller? Someone want to take that to start with?
I can start if you want.
Yeah, sure. Go.
So I think we're going to talk more about the actual journey that we went on, but I think ultimately what we've been able to showcase for the business in slower hiring times is that having recruiting always on provides huge advantage when we do get into those surges of hiring. So we've really managed to educate the business on the importance of having talent communities, and that the talent you hire very often you should be meeting all the time. And where we really want to make a dent on DEI and representation, you can't hire in the moment. You have to plan ahead if you want to do anything meaningful. So don't get me wrong, right? This has been a journey. It has been very challenging to get leaders to be proactive about hiring, but now we hear things in the business like, no, don't put hiring on hold, keep going. Like, we know how hard it is when we stop and try and start again. So that's what we've done.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a good example that I can share about that. I mean, I agree, it's very difficult. It's funny how quickly some hiring managers don't want to talk to you when they don't have any headcount, isn't it? You know, that's I think we've all seen that through our careers. But yeah, in one case, our executive recruiting team did a very nice job of, you know, basically they'd been struggling with the idea of wanting to build out a long-term talent engagement program, because again, particularly when you're trying to diversify the C-suite and the executive ranks, you know, to your point, Jen, you don't just do that by calling someone and hoping they'll come. You need to bring build up long-term relationships. And this was one of those things we talked about for a couple of years, but it had always slid down to the bottom of the priority list when the search volume went up. And so, yeah, I give a lot of credit to my head of executive recruiting. She basically took the opportunity to sort of hard code that work into her team's you know, volume during a slow period, and we've now talked about it enough and often enough with the business and the key stakeholders that they now accept that this is a really critical strategic piece of work that should carry on irrespective of whatever else the team is doing, and that the team needs to be resourced that way. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely tough, and there's definitely a lot of pressure to sort of reduce costs when during a tough period, but you can sometimes turn it to your advantage slightly.
Yeah, similar to the other two, that it definitely comes. DEI is probably the easiest one to argue the case for, because I saw some stat years ago from LinkedIn that said you needed 8 touch points with women and minorities to get their attention. I don't know how true that was, but I must have used that data quite a lot in arguing that statement. It certainly feels true anecdotally. So having that chance to engage with candidates and really create that talent ecosystem around you has just been really important. So we have a candidate engagement strategy that we use through our CRM tool, and we will keep going, especially with those types of roles that you know are going to be coming up again, the ones that need the always-on hiring method. For the one-offs, you kind of can just let those go, but sometimes it's good just to be continuing the conversations with those we're always going to be hiring them at some point in the future, and we know that's going to be coming up.
You touched on there about using technology. Is that something that everyone has had to do to kind of, maybe if they have less people in their team or less resource, is technology kind of picking up some of the slack for your companies, CRM or whatever it might be?
From my perspective, I was very interested in using a CRM when I joined Workday. So we're talking, I think that was 7 years ago now, and we talked then about, you know, building our own, and it was like, no, we need it now. And we had a big push there to build out the talent marketing and talent ecosystem. We tried to do it without a CRM tool because we didn't have one at the time, and it's just impossible to try and build that up without a tool. And we brought in Beamery there, and that's exactly what we use at VMware, and it's a game changer. I don't think it's necessary as having something like LinkedIn, or if you can find an equivalent, you need it there now to actually keep going with an engagement strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the first thing we always do is pivot to project work, right, to keep the team busy. And it's always the things that the team has been struggling to focus on. But I agree. I mean, I think, you know, again, we've been spending a lot of time searching for silver linings and making sure that we can leverage this period where we're not flat out for a change. And we've been flat out for the previous several years, as I'm sure most other TA teams have been as well, and really try and get a lot more thoughtful about, you know, I mean, we're still a mid-sized public company, and we're trying to sort of kick on to that next level of scale. And so we've been having a lot of conversations as an HR team about what does that look like, and what are we going to need to change as a TA function in order to do that. So I think, again, very much trying to align our mission as a team. You know, it's easy to sort of get a bit, you know, frankly, down in the dumps about the fact that your volume's been cut in half, or there's been a hiring freeze or a slowdown or whatever it is. But trying to really sort of focus our mission on the company's strategy and make sure that we're investing in projects and things that are going to pay off in the mid to long term. Because again, you know, even our CFO, who is very cost conscious, understandably, has been, he gets where we're trying to get to. And so if you can show him the work you're doing directly impacts that, then that's helpful.
Yeah. So I suppose maybe touching on that CFO point, because obviously that's the key operative point, is can you get budget and can you get a buy-in for future investment, which saves money in the future? Can we talk a little about like how you might have those conversations? So if there are people listening that maybe haven't had those kind of CFO conversations before, how do you frame investing in TA right now as a sort of future value for the business?
I mean, I think I'm in a lucky position where at Intuit, honestly, the people function is very highly valued, and we do get a lot of investment because Intuit, when companies have their key stakeholders, customers often come first. Well, at Intuit, people come first. So I think we do get more than our fair share of the money. But don't get me wrong, like we still had to have, because we're implementing a CRM at the moment. Prior to that, Google Sheets and iSIMS was kind of our teams had an awful experience. But the reason that we invested is because we're thinking much longer term. We're not just thinking about this fiscal year. And honestly, appealing to the finance team, that has really worked. We're setting ourselves up for 2 years time, 3 years time, 5 years time. And we've also announced as a company these huge like 2030 goals, which will require huge transformation from the company. So we just keep laddering up to where we're ultimately trying to get to, like not what the hiring numbers are for this year. And we're also able to make the case through, we're hiring in different locations. We were very US heavy in the past. That's really drastically changing. And markets where it's much harder to hire than Intuit's traditionally hired. So that helped us make the case for why we needed a CRM. Plus, they all got really wounded when we turned off recruiting during COVID. And then it took us 9 months to catch up to where we'd been. So people still remember that and how much pressure that put us under as a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that point about being always on. And, I think now many of us that have been doing this a while have been able to prove with data just how long it can take to rebuild momentum. So it's not like a tap or you can turn on and turn off. You can scale down the team, and often in the past I've done that through managing down my team size through attrition and then thinking about how we can add technology, to your point, Phil, to kind of drive more efficiency. But sort of going from 0 to 100 or vice versa, just that's not gonna be successful in the long run.
Yeah. It's always going to be there, isn't it, with your discussions about workforce planning and the more data you have, the better the conversation goes with finance. To be able to show, right, this many recruiters can fill this many roles in this period of time. And so if you're going to give us a workforce plan or a headcount plan where 90% of the hiring is in the first half of the year, that's not going to happen, So yeah. You can have really good discussions because the data is there. It's whatever data you have. I've had this discussion with very little data and then with really rich data going back a few years to be able to argue how much you can hire at any certain time. But I do think finance and TA can have a really good relationship because they are talking about data. They've got a really good understanding of cost and time and able to back that up with data far easier than any other people conversation, because we can truly see the value of hiring in a certain amount of time and having that empty seat. The impact of an empty seat is pretty easy to demonstrate.
Yeah. One other thing, Phil, just before we move on, that just occurred to me. We're also going through, I'm sure a lot of you are going through this, where in the past, right, Intuit has not really dealt with lack of performance. Let's just say we're very nice. But now it's got to the point, because we just used to keep hiring people, and we won't really tackle the performance issues. But another thing that's really helped this year is we're really beginning to tackle that. And we're able to predict attrition in a way that you can't generally, right? But if people are going through performance situations, roughly when you're going to see the impact to the business. That's also really helped with finance. Like they love that predictability. They love the fact that we're ahead of it. So that was just another point that came into my head.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hearing that from lots and lots of people that performance management has been really tightened up, and that can only be a good thing, I think, for businesses. I think it's a real macro point about where the technology is going, I think, as well, of just the sort of the bloat, I suppose, really, that companies potentially have been addicted to is probably ending right now. So hopefully that makes leaner teams easier to get stuff done in organizations, less people to well, so one of the things I think we've talked about as a sort of group collectively is how we've upskilled functions. And so when you've got, essentially a team of TA people, my belief, and I think the belief of everyone here, is that TA people are actually genuinely multi-skilled, and that a great TA person has lots and lots of brilliant skills. So we've talked a little about how we've repurposed people to do different things in the organizations. That maybe we could talk a little bit about that and some of the ideas that we've had and some really that we've had.
You want to go on that one, Andrea? Because I think you had a really cool program that you were talking about at VMware where you were.
Yeah, I can go first. So we started this with we had not enough recruiters in EMEA, for example. We had slightly too many in the US. And so what we wanted to do is create an opportunity so that people could join another team for 3 months, and do it as an entirety, rather than taking 1 or 2 recs from people and sharing it out. We're trying to do it a little bit more holistically, so you got some good experience. And we packaged this up so it was, you could sign up on a dashboard, you could you could post whatever the opportunity was on the dashboard. People could sign up for it, and then they could choose who was going to be the best fit, and it could all be done within a week. And from that, we built this TA rotation program. So we had people moving into different parts of TA. Some of them, they were going on to project work, and it was a really nice way to track the work that people were doing. So really helped as well to understand in the downturn times what was going on and what work people were doing, and it was all getting tracked. Now, we started doing it just within TA, but when we were not hiring that much outside, then we found that some of those other teams would help. So we had requests coming from the deal management team, from the office of the CEO, from other parts of HR to come and can we get a TA person to come and help us for 3 months? And so we made that happen, and we did 82 TA rotations in that first 9 to 10 months, which was incredible to see so many go through. Some people ended up just staying in that role. Others had it extended to 6 months. We didn't let them go on past 6 months, because then there's an argument that it should be a permanent job and not just a short-term one. But lots and lots of benefits from doing it, including the upskilling of the team, better understanding of the business they might be supporting, better mobility, and a really greater understanding of the fungibility of a TA resource as well. So absolutely loved it. It's now part of the bigger business picture. So it's not just TA people that do this. It's folded into a bigger program. But it's been a great way of moving talent around the organization and keeping people relevant and motivated.
Yeah, we did the same thing, and it's been a huge success. I mean, it started from, frankly, a place of relative desperation, where we are close to our finance partners, and they were like, we really don't see volume picking up through the rest of the fiscal year. Like, so what are you going to do? And yeah, so my leadership team and I got pretty creative and just got out into the business, and we're lucky. We've got great relationships with our stakeholders, and many of our recruiters are very credible. And we just, we started building a list of potential assignments and scoping them out. And what was cool was, I think often the default is to go look in the broader HR team, and there was plenty of stuff. I think 4 or 5 of our folks ended up doing project work, covering leaves, or picking up work that just wasn't being done, or wasn't, the team wasn't getting to it because they were limited in resources themselves. But the sort of nice thing was that we managed to find homes for the team in, farther flung parts of the business. There were 2 folks that ended up being chiefs of staff to engineering VPs, and there was one person who helped out in marketing and did some copywriting, and somebody else was working in our solutions consulting team and go-to-market enablement. And so it was pretty cool to see, very sort of like we just said, TA folks are resourceful, multi-skilled, highly talented individuals, and it was great to sort of see them out there. And we tried to be quite selective in the sense that we really wanted to make sure these assignments were successful, because the alternative probably wasn't good. So in some cases we cherry pick people, and we said, oh, Caitlin supports our field engineering team and they have an assignment, let's put her in there, because if nothing else, that means that when she can come back to the team, it's only going to have increased her knowledge of that organization and make it easier, make her a more effective recruiter in supporting them. In other cases, I think to Andrea's point, we've had sort of 4 or 5 people who have had longer term opportunities that open up as a result. And so that's always a little bittersweet for us, so seeing talented folks leave, but it's also a fantastic internal mobility story. So yeah, and it was great to hear Andrea's program, because it sounds like at VMware it's turned into a formal program. And we talked about that. We talked about the fact that we've all been through these wild upswings before, and it's probably going to happen again. And so being able to sort of codify and programatize this kind of thing, and I think and maybe turn it into something that sort of lives on, might well be a really cool sort of legacy to this whole episode.
Yeah, we did similar things where we had surges in exec hiring and in hiring in Israel. So we repositioned resources in the US, like similar situation to you, Andrea. We had a lot of resources in the US and things had slowed down. But I think the thing I want to talk about that's different just to what we covered was, so we managed to keep recruiters busy all year, regardless of the issues that were going on in certain parts of the business, because we have these P&P priorities. So people and places is the name of our function. And we have key priorities, usually 6 to 8 of them each year. Could be things like driving big change in internal mobility, or specific work we're doing around DEI, or we're transforming Workday at the moment because we have an instance of Workday from like 1822 or something. So there's key like projects where we build mission-based teams around them. And we were able to utilize a lot of our TA resources in those projects. Like, for example, right now I'm driving work on retaining our underrepresented employees at certain levels in the US, right? Arguably, what's that got to do with you, Jen? Like, you're in TA, but we just don't think about the people resources like that. Like, you're ultimately a high-performing people resource. We can direct you wherever you're needed. And it honestly boosted TA's brand phenomenally, because people began to see like how strategic our team was and how valuable their point of view was. And they've all built their networks massively within the people and places functions, and given them visibility with SLT. But it was helped by the fact we have people and places craft skills. So we actually have 5 key skills that we've mapped that make sense across all functions in people and places. So it made it easier for us and for the recruiters themselves to sell themselves, right? Like, I embody these, skills you're looking for. Like, here are the examples. So that's really helped the team. They built a lot of skills.
Yeah, cool. Great to hear. So I suppose one of the things I kind of think about when maybe let's rephrase this. So recruiters typically are quite target-driven people and very driven by sort of achieving goals. And I guess one of the things we've probably all been experiencing is that when you lower the volume down, there's less sort of success, I suppose, really for the recruiters. So how do we keep people, how have we kept people motivated and engaged during those periods when maybe, they may be only carrying a few recs at a time when they're used to 15 to 20 or maybe more?
It's true, because I don't know if you all find this, but and I think it's true of myself as well. The minute I'm not busy, I feel like I'm less good at my job, right? I suddenly let balls drop that like you don't let drop when you're up to your eyeballs in requisitions. So I think we probably didn't manage it well in some of the quieter periods, and you could definitely see people feeling demotivated. But I think what helped us was we rethought all of their goals. So if they're on a people and places priority, we developed very specific goals about the work they were doing on that priority, and linked that to how their performance would be assessed at the end of the year. So at that point, it became less of an issue, because they knew they weren't going to be dinged because they had less hires, right? but that took us a bit of learning to get there, right? But that's ultimately what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past we were using the TA rotation program, which was effective for that, but it's still got to be roughly the right size function to suit the hiring. We're going towards an acquisition at the moment, so of course hiring is a little bit lower. It's also coming towards the end of the year, so we have got people that have got a lot less recs than they would do normally. But we are using the time for people to upskill. Of course, anything that can be done project-wise, it's a great time to get that done. In the past as well, if it was light on the experienced hiring, it might be really busy on the graduate hiring or university hiring, and so we would augment whichever team it was by swapping people around. But yeah, right now, I mean, my team's probably saying they've done enough training for September already. But I think, there's a lot of times when we don't actually give people the opportunity to upskill, to train, to do that course that they've been meaning to do. So, that's the nature of TA work sometimes, isn't it? It's very much feast and famine.
I mean, I think what you were saying about, people are doing less hires, and I think as leaders, it's easy for us to kind of forget that immediately triggers a sort of, insecurity around their job, right? And given recent times, rightly so. So yeah, we've had to spend a lot of time reassuring folks that, it's fine. We're well aware of the volume, and you're not going to get dinged because you've only done 5 hires, this quarter, as opposed to the normal ratio. I mean, the other thing is, I think you're right. I'm still sort of hard coded in the way I sort of grew up in the industry as a recruiter, and sort of being incredibly task oriented and results driven, and yet we've tried to pivot that mindset of our team away from being so transactional to operating more strategically, and so trying to sort of empower the team, I guess is the right word, to kind of lean into that and say, look, it's okay. You can't change the fact that you've got far fewer recs than you would normally have, but what are the other ways in which you can offer value to the business, and how can you be strategic as a TA partner? Because again, we spend all this time referring to ourselves as talent partners, not recruiters or not staffing professionals. So this is the time when we have to kind of show that, and so I think, I mean, we all know that there are folks, the folks on your team that are just like the sort of the machine that just bang out hires, in a sort of incredibly sort of rhythmic way. I mean, they're invaluable, but again, sometimes you've got to really, if those people can get stuck in their careers, if they haven't made that pivot from just being very transactional on the way that they approach their work, and are really starting to sort of elevate their thinking about the different ways in which they can offer support to the business. So I think it's, again, needs must, and but this is a time when we can really encourage them to think that way.
Yeah.
Is anyone doing anything sort of interesting that sort of thinking about that shift from maybe this quarter to maybe 2 years down the track? Is there anything interesting going on in organizations at the moment that we're sort of investing in right now that we think will actually pay dividends in the future? Like some kind of, I can't think of an example of what it might be, but any ideas on that?
I think one thing we're doing, and we're on the journey, it's like definitely not done, is really trying to make the people and places organization work as an end-to-end system. So we're trying to get the organization to be really employee or candidate for, like, think about the experience we're trying to create, and think about like all of the touch points and all of the teams that are going to have to be involved if you're going to make that change. So it's probably like a bit of program management that we're trying to teach, and also just the awareness and importance of not just operating in your like little funnel. Like, for example, we completely reinvented our internal assessment process, spoke to no one outside TA. And that didn't work out so well. We got there, right? But we ended up having to delay by months because we had not pulled in the right people along the journey. And we ended up with a much better offering at the end. So it's kind of like teaching end-to-end thinking, as opposed to, it's probably a little bit about what you said, David. It's like trying to get out of this, I want to get my work done, to I want to create an amazing experience for our candidates, our employees, and make a huge impact on the whole company, not just my like wee bit of it. And that's quite a hard mindset shift, because it means you have to go really slow at the beginning. to then be able to go faster. But a lot of the recruiters especially are struggling that are on these priority teams because they're like, I just want to get it done. And there's lots of coaching around, okay, but if you did it right now with the way you're thinking about it, is that really delivering what you said was this delightful experience for her? So it's just a lot of coaching and development. I think great skills, right, for any kind of people leadership role you would ever have.
Before we do, we've made a few changes as well. I think they were a little bit different to what Jen was doing, but we did actually go back to basics of what do we want our TA function to look like, and we redefined the roles, and with an eye line to the future of, well, where are things going? How do we future-proof our TA function from a, what kind of skills are people going to need? So we moved our talent of our recruiters more into talent advisors, and it really defined what that was and being much more business-centric. We redefined our sourcing to talent discovery and brought in this whole candidate engagement and talent intelligence piece. And then for our coordinators, they moved much more into the talent experience. And so these were our, they're always going to be your most junior people, but how do we equip them to be learning the skills to be recruiters of the future? How do we get them better at things like stakeholder management, using the ATS, and driving conversations as well? And I have to say, for me, seeing the impact of giving those talent experience partners, previously called coordinators, that wider role has such an impact. They really can step up to be doing a lot more. And as we start to see more and more automation come in, we want them to be able to take on a much broader role and be able to move that career path into recruiters. I'm sure Jen and David had exactly the same thing when, we were all trying to hire so many people, and there were certain tech companies out there that had already hired all the recruiters out there, and we just had no one we could hire. And it was too late to grow your own. So now we need to be much, much better as TA functions of growing our own and building that career journey throughout TA and future-proofing us against what's coming in from an AI perspective so that people are using things much more effectively. I don't think TA organizations are ever going to get back to the size they were 2 years ago. I think we're going to be much more slimmed down, but using much better technology in the future.
Okay. Agreed.
I think we're still trying to digest and learn some of the things that we learned during COVID, right? I mean, and we learned a lot about, different location strategies, and some of them were highly effective. And now, because of, the business deciding to pivot and try and encourage more people to come up to the office, we've lost some of those advantages, and yet we still have the lessons learned. I think the other thing is we're going through this huge up and down period, cycle, whatever you want to call it, but the long-term trends, the long-term demographic trends remain the same. And I think when, AI is going to generate this massive new hype cycle that's going to get every tech company, giddy with excitement again, and get leaders making bold, aspirational headcount goals and targets, and we're going to be back into the madness probably in about 6 months here. But I do think you're right, that we're all studying this really hard. We're all looking at how we think these shifts are going to impact our teams. I mean, it's interesting what Jen was saying about trying to get more strategic and sort of connecting the employee or the candidate's experience and all the touch points they have with that sort of continuous journey into being an employee and what that means. And I think, if there will be probably more automation in some elements of the hiring process, like, scheduling will become faster and more effective, and maybe you don't need as many sources, or the role of the sourcer might change and become more focused on deep dives into really niche areas as opposed to just blanket candidate generation, because the technology can do that. What does that mean for the role of the recruiter? I think it probably means that they're going to they need to kind of almost again continue moving up the value chain and get more involved in the people that they hire in their first 90 days, and sort of almost connect those dots between the overworked and sort of under-resourced people partner teams or HR business partner teams that generally, have got crazy ratios and can't afford to look after folks that have just been hired, right? So I think we will probably see that shift, but again, at this point we're all still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I've definitely seen that in a few people that I've met with recently that have taken on the talent remit as TA leaders, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see that sort of TA focus or the TA mindset focused on talent more broadly. I think so. Quite exciting, actually. I was going to ask actually all of you what you thought. What have we kind of learned from this period, and what do we think the next phase looks like? Whatever that, if that is 6 months, if that is, however long it might be. Does anyone want to think about what the future looks like?
I think what I've learned from all this churn is not to feel remotely apologetic about having a well-staffed TA team. Like before, when someone would come to me and be like, "Oh, how many recs do the recruiters have?" It's like, why is that relevant? Tell me more, about why you're asking. Because what's your expectation, right, of a recruiter? And then they start spelling out their expectation. You're like, do you think that happens when they have 25 recs? So I think I've become a lot more confident about being able to position how important it is to retain our numbers, even when we see this churn, for sure. And then like what's coming in the future, I know we've all like talked about like Gen AI a million times and everyone's probably bored of it at this stage, but it already is getting rid of so much of the menial work that we need to do, like the back and forth on job specs, like all this stuff. I think is going to remove a lot of that from our recruiters' plates. And then I think it'll either become really clear that our recruiters can evolve to be strategic, or they won't be able to, right? And we'll have to think about up-leveling them, getting new talent. Yeah, I think they're my two thoughts.
Any other thoughts on that? David, you already touched on it. You both actually touched on it already.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of heartened by the fact that I don't, I think there is so much nuance in the role, and as we've talked about this morning or this afternoon, so much. I think now there's so much more understanding from business stakeholders about everything that goes into maintaining a talent function and keeping that pipeline open and always on and competing for talent in an intensely competitive market. So I think there's a bit more sort of respect and understanding that it takes more than just, chucking a couple of CVs around. So I think that helps, right? That helps us sort of position ourselves more favorably in the future. And I still remember sending out the note to my team saying, "Oh, we're going to have to go to virtual interviews." And I was like, "I'm not sure if this is going to work." I'm really, I personally consider myself pretty old school. I'm like, no one's going to change jobs if they haven't come into the office and met people in person. And that wasn't a great prediction, was it? So yeah, I think we're still trying to digest some of these lessons.
Yeah.
I mean, this is definitely already started. Oh, sorry. That is not my phone. It's somewhere hidden in a bag in here.
Oh, no.
I'm just going to have to ignore it because it's not mine. Sorry. Can you hear me still? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a really annoying ringtone. So I think people are going to have to get better at data. We've talked a lot about this, and we're pretty fortunate. We have some really great data tools that we use, and you can use that to form opinions about what's actually going on in the market. We have Power BI, Tableau, LinkedIn Talent Insights, Seek Out. We talked about tech earlier. I mean, we've got some really good tech at our fingertips, but none of that means anything unless you've got every single person in TA is equipped to be able to take a picture and understand how does that translate to the strategy? How does that impact on where do we hire? How do we hire? How are we going? What little lever can we tweak that's going to make a difference to the quality of person that we hire or our diversity or whatever it might be? So that, I think, is a massive... I've underestimated how big a change that is and how much we need to go through that. We've definitely started, but I think that journey will continue for the next couple of years across many TA functions, really getting better at that data-driven conversations.
I think you're right, Andrew. Just one more thing I was thinking as you were talking. I had a realization through the crazy hiring times of how much development we had to do with the team around how you build a funnel. So how do you get to the end number and work your way back using data? And I realized they'd clearly been able to get through not doing that. And suddenly we have these crazy numbers and very tight timelines. And there's still opportunity there, but it just we were able to diagnose very quickly where problems were in a way that we wouldn't have been able to in the past. So I'm still going to go on that journey with the team of really helping them build really robust funnel metrics that they can educate their leaders on. And yeah.
Are we seeing, I suppose it's difficult for you to tell, Jenna, into it because you weren't necessarily tracking it before, but are we seeing any difference in funnel metrics at the moment in terms of how many people it takes to get through now and conversion rates, etc.?
I mean, the only thing that I'm seeing that's really different is the quality of people is not great at the moment. I think, to be honest, it's taking a lot more work to screen people to get to your shortlist and then your finalists. I'm definitely finding that response rates at the top of the funnel are much higher, right, than they were when it was very much a candidate-driven market. But that creates a lot of work too, right? Like I said, you have to get through all of that. I'm definitely right now struggling with there are underrepresented candidates, whether whether it's gender underrepresentation, other underrepresentation, that are not making it through certain steps of the process. And I don't really understand why yet. We're digging into it because we have diverse panels. We make sure we have diverse slates of candidates, but we're still seeing a disproportionately lower conversion rate. So I'm digging into that right now. But yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, our offer acceptance rate is sky high, which is, I guess, just shows that there's generally speaking a lower volume of opportunities, and candidates are a bit more hesitant to kind of play the game and sort of try and play you off against 3 or 4 other companies. So I guess that's a good news. Yeah, but to Jen's point, I mean, the applicant volume's gone through the roof, and so now the recruiters are back in the game of having to work through all of that and make sure that we're filtering people carefully and everyone's getting a response, and that's really hard. Again, I think that's one of the things that technology can now help with, but but again, if you want to differentiate yourself and have a really great employment brand, you don't just press the button and sort of push the notes out to everyone, because that doesn't really set the right tone for the future. So
anything to add, Andrea, as we finish?
I just think candidate experience is always going to be important, and I we do take it seriously and we measure it, and I think it's like any of those things. If you measure it, then and you're tracking it, then it generally gets better.
Yeah, agreed. So, brilliant. Right, I think we're about out of time. Thank you all very much for dedicating some time to us here. Really insightful conversation. It does seem like a webinar that was slightly cursed and that with lots of things wrong during it. I'm not really sure what's going on with the tech. Sorry if anyone had a problem getting into the webinar today. It looks like LinkedIn has got some kind of weird problem. I can't even see the analytics on it, so there's obviously something going on there. But obviously this will be distributed out to all hire members afterwards, so you can watch it on demand. And so thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you.